Hi, I'm Waverly, a PhD candidate in education at the University of California, Irvine. I'm excited to share with you about our research integrating PapyrusAI, a generative AI tool, into several upper division engineering writing classrooms. PapyrusAI is a web-based tool built on a commercially available generative AI model that our lab has developed as part of an NSF-funded project. This tool scaffolds and supports student writing through embedded prompts and documents. It provides teacher control over permitted interactions, and it enhances privacy protection compared to individual access options. Our data sources for this research primarily come from our instructors and students, including interviews that we've conducted, course observations, surveys, the tool itself, so looking at the conversations that students have within PapyrusAI, and then also various instructor meetings and collaboration sessions that we've had. Our research questions focus first on instructors and how they integrate a generative AI tool into their courses, and then secondly, how undergraduate students enrolled in this course interact with the tool and use it for their writing. So first, I'd like to talk about how instructors incorporated AI. So our first instructor, Peter, chose to intentionally scaffold exposure and practice with PapyrusAI throughout the course. So this meant that students were getting opportunities to understand the affordances and capabilities as well as the limitations of AI very early in the course through these intentional activities in which they used AI. By the end of the course, they were given opportunities to try engineering prompts, more advanced techniques for using these AI tools. And these activities were designed by Peter to help facilitate group conversation and also to give students opportunities to evaluate AI output, especially in comparison to their own writing, and then make decisions about what was better, what was helpful for use in their writing, things like that. This is an example of one of the activities that he used. It's a case study activity in which students were asked to consider an ethical case study in light of various ethical theories and code of ethics that they've discussed in the course prior. And when he was designing this activity, Peter identified that there were several classroom constraints, particularly with students not coming prepared to class, that using AI could help with the implementation of the activity. And so there are a couple things I want to note here that were interesting. First, Peter used and leveraged AI's affordances for summarizing text, where he brought in the AI to summarize the case study and give students the summary so that they could get to the heart of the activity faster, where they could talk about and converse about these ethics and to debate with their partners about these for the activity. And so he used the AI's affordances in this way for generating text very quickly to create that summary and help them get to the main part of the activity. He also used the AI for its limitations, which is really interesting, where students, we observed when they were looking at the summaries, they identified themselves that they felt the summary was incomplete and not sufficient for their activity. And so they actually, of their own volition, went back to the source material and corroborated the information or looked for more information that they felt the AI did not help them with. So that was a case in which the instructor, Peter, was able to also leverage the limitations in that way. Rebecca, another instructor, she chose to use AI in a way that focused on authentic experimentation, in which students could decide and get that control in that learning process. They could decide if they chose to use AI or not. And so this is driven very much by what she observes in the classroom over the years of the study, where she made decisions about how to bring it in according to what students needed, what they wanted, what she thought they could benefit from, things like that. And this is an example of where she made that decision, where in this example, this is an assignment that students were asked to complete at the beginning of the course to essentially give her an incoming writing sample, where she could understand how students are writing at the beginning. And she identified a need very early through implementing it in multiple quarters that we needed to understand how students believed or what they believed about generative AI at the beginning of the course so that she could actually tailor how she implemented AI in the course in response to that. And so she would bring in various activities such as giving them opportunities to collaborate with the AI to revise something, creating rubrics, things like that, all in response to what students, she felt that students needed based on what she was observing in the classroom. So an approach that was very driven by what she's observing in real time. The third instructor I'd like to talk about, Calvin, he focused on centering student voice and critical thinking. Now, all of our instructors, of course, focused on voice and focused on critical thinking, but for Calvin, he very heavily emphasized this development of student voice and critical thinking skills throughout the entire course, where all of his activities always came back to these central themes. And because of this, he restricted his use of AI in the course to 2 specific activities to prompt students' critical thinking. And this was because he wanted to make sure students were given the opportunities to practice and develop those critical thinking skills, develop their own opinions and points of view before they turn to a tool so that they could drive the interactions. And so this is an example of one of the activities that he brought in. This is a debate activity in which students were asked to first individually argue with PapyrusAI as a debate opponent in a debate activity where they were assigned a certain topic. So they're given the opportunity to first brainstorm and develop their ideas through this interaction with the AI. Then they were asked to work with their peers in their group to select the best arguments and provide evidence, and then finally present that to the class. And a couple things that were interesting here. First is that the language that he used to describe this activity first to students was one as a tool to promote their critical thinking, to promote their brainstorming, to give them a wall to bounce ideas off. But over time, as students continued to engage with the tool in this way throughout the quarters, he shifted his language to frame AI more as an opponent, particularly an opponent for them to try to win over and assert their opinion over. And this showcases, I think, this perspective that he took, that he really wanted to center student voice, student critical thinking over AI output. And so in this way, he's diminishing that AI output in favor of students' voice. And this was in response to how students were engaging with the tool themselves in the classroom. And then finally, our 4th instructor, James, he chose to approach using PapyrusAI as really just a supplemental tool. So he did not integrate the AI into any class activities out of a fear of over-prescribing AI. In the class, he emphasized students' reflection on the writing process and AI's impact, if any, on their processes. But again, he very explicitly chose not to use the AI in any in-class activities and only allow it as a resource if students chose to themselves turn to using the AI. And he explicitly told students that they did not need to use these AI tools. For any assignments, including the reflection assignments, such as the one on the top left here, students were asked to reflect on how they used AI for their writing, but they were told that they did not need to use AI to complete these assignments, that they could do an alternative version instead, or just reflect on their writing process generally. And so he was really interested in providing resources, not in prescribing the use of AI, because he was afraid of impeding students' development of agency in their writing, where they should be able to make the choices on whether they use it or not. And so he chose not to use it at all in the classroom in fear of impeding that. So some common themes between instructors. First, instructors grounded all of their implementation decisions in their pedagogical content knowledge. So in their expertise of teaching the class, having taught the class many times before with these students, they really grounded what they did and how they chose to go about it in the practices that they already are engaging in the pedagogy they already do. Their primary pedagogical concerns were for students' writing agency and voice, and these primarily drove their choices on whether to use or not use AI in their course and the extent to which they did. And then finally, the group activities that were developed largely situated AI as a writing collaborator towards students' identified writing goals. So having the AI help them with developing or with identifying their purpose, identifying goals, and accomplishing those. And then what was different between instructors? There are many things, but some of the themes that we observed were that instructors differed in terms of how they perceived students' readiness to engage with AI in writing. So if they were ready to make decisions about if AI would be useful in their writing or not, they differed in that perception. They also differed in terms of their views of how to support the development of writing agency, whether to take a completely hands-off approach where they don't require and don't use AI at all during instruction, or if they, on the other hand, mandated its use as part of in-class activities in order to make sure they're all being exposed to and get practice with using AI tools to be able to better make decisions in their process. So different views on this. And then also an interesting thing that we're still exploring, the views of AI as something either organic or other in the teaching and learning of writing. If it's something that can go with the naturally occurring or arising needs of students, of writing needs in the classroom, if AI can support that, or if it's something inherently other in the classroom, as something inherently disruptive and not in a good way. So all these factors shaped their decisions on whether to incorporate or limit AI use in their courses. So now I'd like to talk a little about how students used or did not use AI. And this will be fairly brief, we're still exploring this, but some general themes that we notice are first, that students would use AI to help provide feedback, especially when other writing resources aren't available. So in this case, a student mentioned that when they don't have a peer available to read over their work, ChatGPT could be especially helpful, especially since we know that students tend to write sometimes at 3 a.m. when nobody's awake. So it can be helpful when they aren't available. The AI can also be helpful in identifying writing goals and directions. So in this case, the student realized through interaction with the AI, through being asked questions and asked to reflect on their writing process, that they should be answering some of these questions in their research paper, that they identified certain gaps in their writing through this interaction, developed a much more effective controlling idea through that interaction, and then realize, okay, I should bring this into the writing itself to improve it. So getting a direction, getting a goal to direct their future improvements for their writing. And then students also, through interaction with AI, recognize some limitations in their output, where AI had limitations with regard to restriction of human voice in writing. And through that interaction, they could identify that I can use AI for certain pieces, like revision and sentence generation, but the human is still very important in that to bring in that voice. And then there were some students who decided not to use AI because they wanted to believe that they learned from the process of writing. And so they chose to avoid using AI because they felt that it could impede in that learning process. And then I'd like to end with a very brief summary of some of the evolving pedagogy and practices that we've been exploring and developing materials for over our years of the study so far. So the first is the process by which instructors might consider approaching infusing AI into their curriculum. This is one that's grounded very much in the learning objectives of their course and of their activities, what they want their students to learn. So first, we always suggest that they should identify their learning objectives. Then from those learning objectives, they can determine what an appropriate AI role might be. So what can AI do to support those learning objectives, especially where students may be struggling traditionally in the previous iterations of the activity, or if they have resource constraints such as time or people available to provide feedback, where can AI actually support and where maybe should it be limited? Then they can revise the activity in a way that's appropriate for their classroom and their resources. They can reflect on the revised curriculum after implementing it, especially in coordination with student feedback, and then they can reintroduce learning as needed to decide, okay, this went one way, I'd like to improve it in this way. Let's reintroduce new activities or let's revise the activity further. So a process that's very consistent with how many instructors already approach integrating technology and integrating new activities and new curriculum in their courses. And then for students, we have general practices that we believe are effective for making sure their use of AI is human driven. So making sure that they think first about what they want to write before they start using AI, so that that process is driven by what they want and what they know already and have identified as needs in their writing. Then they can move into prompting techniques that they can use to tailor the output. We encourage them to be the boss in these interactions, where as they're prompting, they should remember that they are the ones driving the interaction, and they should tell it that it's wrong. They should ask it for clarification. They should make sure they're getting what they need from the AI output because they are the ones driving the interaction. Then we always encourage students to corroborate and interrogate the information, so corroborating with reliable sources, interrogating the output for biases, and also just if it's helpful for them, and then reflecting on all of these processes. So thinking about what worked and what didn't, and what they could do in the future to either use AI or not in their writing process if they choose to. So reflecting on whether AI even has a role in their process. We think that these are really good practices that we've shared with students in terms of how they can make sure that their AI use is something driven by themselves and is something that works to support their identified goals. If you're interested in learning more about this project or looking at any of the resources we've developed, you can visit genaied.org. But thank you for listening to this presentation. I look forward to hearing the rest of the panel and hearing your questions. Thank you.